There isn't this like, oh well, Hamas goes about what they perceive as resistance. They go about it in a brutal and indiscriminate fashion, and Israel goes about their responses measured and precise. No, there's none of this. Let's all remember that Israel currently is dropping bombs on mothers, children, grandmothers, all of these people. There is no difference here between what the IDF is participating in and what Hamas has done. Early in the month, October 7th, a attack by the terrorist organization Hamas has stirred the Israeli government's jimmies, to say the least, and has led to quite a lot of violence in the area, quite a lot of bombing, just generally, what most are describing, I think fairly, a genocide in Gaza of Palestinian people by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. Calls for a ceasefire here in the U.S. have been growing around the country. We see, go to pretty much any major city, and you are probably going to see at least one protest going on. I know this upcoming Saturday in D.C., there's going to be a Free Palestine protest going on in March. So, that's kind of the, as Americans, I think, begin to, or I guess continue to see the destruction, the devastation, all of it, that that Israel is bringing down to bear on Gaza. I think the less the appetite grows for support for that regime here in the U.S. But as I said, calls for ceasefire have been growing, and the Netanyahu government and Netanyahu himself, the president of Israel, has not been incredibly interested in hearing out those. So let's go take a look at that, and then we will read an article from Ryan Grimm.
We want to take you now to Tel Aviv, where on your screen right there, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the nation and the world. Let's listen.
Israel will fight. Since October 7th,
it's not really
Israel
much of a
has
fight.
been at war. Israel did not start this war.
What's funny, okay, so let's point out a few things. What is war, right? War is usually a conflict between two forces. Has this looked like war at all to anybody? Right? Like, it's just, you look at all this stuff. You look at the bombings of hospitals, of civilian checkpoints, or civilian, I shouldn't say checkpoints, civilian regions, indiscriminate bombings. And we're told that this is a war. This isn't a war. This is Israel once again kind of flexing their power, their control over another population. I mean, there just isn't really much of an argument for anything other than that. It's just, this isn't much of a conflict. This is just this is the what's the old like Simpson clip where it's like beating a dead horse. That's all that's happening.
Israel did not want this war, but Israel will win this war. Hamas launched this war by perpetrating the worst savagery our people have seen since the Holocaust. Hamas murdered children in front of their parents, murdered parents in front of their children.
Again, and again, let's keep in mind, these bombings aren't targeted bombings at members of Hamas. To say that, like, the idea that, like, let's keep in mind the idea that, oh, when Hamas kills children in front of their parents and parents in front of their children, and they do all of this slaughter and all of this stuff, let's all remember that Israel currently is dropping bombs on mothers, children, grandmothers, all of these people. There is no difference here between what the IDF is participating in end what Hamas has done. There just isn't. There isn't this like, oh well, Hamas goes about what they perceive as resistance. They go about it in a brutal and indiscriminate fashion, and Israel goes about their responses measured and precise. No, there's none of this. This has been an invitation, a what's the word I'm looking for? A green light to carte blanche bomb a group of people with, again, the support of Western allies. For what reason? We're told stability in the region, even though this is drawing nothing but instability.
They burned people alive. They raped women. They beheaded men. They tortured Holocaust survivors. They kidnapped babies. They committed the most horrific crimes imaginable.
And yet the Israeli government, the IDF, and Netanyahu's government isn't going after Hamas. They're just not. They're going after Hamas by just leveling, just raising the entire city. Like that's their plan. No different. When this first started, and I was talking to a few people, I think I made the obvious, I think should be an obvious point to most Americans, which is, what did we do after 9/11? We said, our leaders said it was, this or that group, and we ended up invading Iraq and Afghanistan for what? Indiscriminately bombing, hundreds of thousands of civilians dead. To what end? Nothing really. We created more extremism. We created the conditions for ISIS to grow. We made ourselves, and by ourselves, keep in mind, ourselves is not the president. Ourselves is not like, high government officials. All of the actions that we took in the wake of 9/11 stood to make you and me, American citizens, less safe. Everything we did, everything our government did in our name, made us less safe. They facilitated and created the conditions for ISIS that would go on to be a danger to people in that region and possible dangers to us here domestically. And this is no different than the relationship that Israelis have to their government, to this far-right Netanyahu government. Because what they're betting on, and what Netanyahu is betting on, is that all of the bloodshed in Gaza, all of the bloodshed on the West Bank, all of it is going to create more support for Hamas, more support for Hezbollah, more support for any extremist group that opposes Israel. Any extremist group that will take this situation and make it worse for the people of Israel. Because, and this is the key, because Netanyahu and his government have figured out, or at the very least have, what's the word I'm looking for? Have created a situation where they keep making it more dangerous, and the people of Israel only have one person to run back into the arms of. And that's this guy, giving him more power over the region and over his people. Understand, Israeli lives will be lost in all of this, and all of it will come to the advantage and the advancement in positioning of Netanyahu in that country. Every single time, and I see it all the time on social media, posting about Israeli citizens who have been kidnapped. Every single time they put out propaganda, they put out media reminding you that, hey, our citizens are being kidnapped, our citizens are being killed, our citizens, all this feigning to care about the region, the stability in the region, the people of Israel. All of this is a smokescreen. All of it is. Because at the end of the day, the only person who benefits from any of this is Benjamin Netanyahu. That's the only person who benefits. By creating a situation where his population is at risk and they all have to run to him for defense. That is the situation that's been created. On this platform, let me say, if there's one thing we're not going to do, we are not going to draw a similarity. We're not going to draw a what I think is an unfair equivalence between the IDF and Netanyahu's government versus their people. Israelites, people of Israel, are their own people with wide ranges of political beliefs, with wide ranges of tolerances for this stuff. And at the end of the day, I hold the same opinion when it comes to Palestine and Hamas. Hamas, at the end of the day, is an extremist faction within Palestine. The same way we have in the U.S., we have extremist factions. But like, this isn't the freedom fighters that some might characterize them as. What they are is quite frankly, the last, I don't want to say last ditch effort, or maybe just the lasting emotions after occupation. But certainly, not every Palestinian living in Gaza is a member of Hamas, and not every Israeli citizen is a supporter or a supporter of Netanyahu or a member of the IDF. We need to draw distinctions in these groups, because in the middle of both these extremes, IDF and Hamas, we have regular ass people just trying to live their fucking lives. That's all. It's just and the reason why we see a lot of this is like I said, just because the Netanyahu government benefits from the terror that Hamas creates. So that's why that they've done their best to make Palestinian Authority weak and everything else. Bob Omega, what's your view on all of this? I mean, my general view is that there are civilians caught in the middle of both these two extreme groups, and there's only one side of this that holds power and holds the ability to stop this conflict, which is Israel. I don't think that's going to happen because it's led by somebody who benefits from from the continued violence. What's the what did Homeboy say in Game of Thrones? The chaos. Chaos is a ladder. And Netanyahu understands this. And it's fucking gross. It's fucking gross. But either way, let's just continue, I guess. I've done a lot of talking and whatnot, but let's just continue.
They're part of the axis of evil that Iran has formed. An axis of terror that works by arming, training, and financing Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and other terror proxies throughout the Middle East and beyond the Middle East. In fighting Hamas and the Iranian axis of terror, Israel is fighting the enemies of civilization itself.
Oh yeah, and keep in mind, we had in terms of Iran, we had a nuclear deal with them to keep kind of the region, denuclearized to a degree. But, thanks to the Trump administration, we no longer have that deal. And I think Biden's been dragging his heels on it, if I remember correctly.
Victory over these enemies begins with moral clarity. It begins with knowing the difference between good and evil, between right and wrong. It means making a moral decision.
So, wait. So if we want to talk about moral clarity, is moral clarity bombing hospitals? I'm sorry, where's the... Is that a legitimate military strategic target or what? Like, again, it's indiscriminate bombings. Like, what about any of this is, what's it called? Is morally justifiable?
Distinction between the deliberate murder of the innocent and the unintentional casualties that accompany every legitimate war, even the most just war. It means holding Hamas responsible for the double war crime it commits every day by deliberately targeting Israeli civilians while deliberately using Palestinian civilians as human shields.
Christ above, man, I'll tell you, it's fucking crazy to me. It's actually fucking crazy to me. The amount of gaslighting that goes on from the fucking Israeli government. Like, keep in mind also, Israeli citizens have died in bombings by Israel. Like, this isn't a situation where they've been trying to negotiate their hostages. They just don't give a shit. Because, like, for Netanyahu, when hostages die, they're martyrs. And then they can fucking campaign on the deaths of those people to validate or to motivate their society, their citizenry to support more bombings, more killings of Palestinians, which ends up leading to more killings of Israelis. It's again, only one person has actual power in this scenario, and it's this asshole. And how many, like, I count every Palestinian life and every fucking Israeli life on this motherfucker's feet. Every single one of them.
It means making clear that the use of human shields is not only an immoral tactic of terror, but also an ineffective one. Because as long as Hamas's use of Palestinian human shields result in the international community blaming Israel, Hamas will continue to use it as a tool of terror, and so will others. Hamas will continue to use
Wait. When is Hamas using Palestinian citizens? They're kidnapping Israeli citizens. And then what? Or is he just talking about, like, oh, well, you know, we bomb these, like, places and there's, like, some civilians of the Palestinian and, you know, they're like human shields or whatever, but we don't really care because we're going to bomb it anyway. We're not going to hesitate because they're Palestinians. They're not really, it doesn't really matter, but, like, fuck, dude.
In Gaza's hospitals as the command posts of its vast terror tunnel network. It will continue to use mosques as fortified military positions and weapon depots.
Oh yeah.
It will continue to steal.
Do you notice also, like, churches and places of worship are also always rally points for, like, citizens, because everyone, like, because they're, you know, they're usually big buildings that you can get people normally gather in under positive circumstances. So when, like, wars happen, war zones, you see a lot of civilians you know, flood into those kinds of places because they're hubs basically, right? You know, they're not targets usually because there's kind of like an understanding in war that those places aren't like targets in the same way, especially let's be clear here. If there's any two militaries that are well equipped enough to know when there is a military post and there is a civilian you know, like, shelter, it's Israel in the US. But that hasn't mattered now, has it?
Fuel and humanitarian assistance from UN facilities.
I hope any of this has answered your question,
Israel is doing everything
Bob,
to get Palestinian civilians out of harm's way. Hamas is doing everything to keep Palestinian civilians in harm's way. Israel urges Palestinian civilians to leave the areas of
It's such fucking
conflict,
gaslighting, man, I swear.
while Hamas prevents those civilians from leaving those areas
gaslighting.
at gunpoint. Hamas is also preventing foreign nationals from leaving Gaza altogether. And most despicably,
Hamas is doing that? Last time I checked, it was Gazans who were not allowed to leave the region because Israel has shut down any of the exits. That's just last time I checked. You know, I didn't realize Hamas was like the governing force in fucking Gaza. I didn't realize this.
Is holding over 200 Israeli hostages.
I forgot Hamas was occupying Gaza, not
33 children. Holding
Christ.
them, terrorizing them, keeping them as hostages.
Oh, and do we all remember? Okay, so you might have seen, like, this is the crazy part too. You probably saw that story. Can I find it really quickly? I bet I can. Israel, Hamas, babies, cages? Let's see. What? Okay, can I find like, I don't know. Viral video miscaptioned as treatment of Israeli kids by Hamas. Sure, we'll check this one. This one looks fine. Let's see. Yeah. A bunch of people yeah. I remember seeing this really early on. Yeah, this wasn't even, yeah. This was originally, can I see the, oh, these are like, oh, I can't read that. So yeah, there was like postings of like these pictures of like kids in cages, and it was all like, look what Hamas has done to these Israeli children, and it's like utter bullshit. I remember because this got circulated so quickly. Here we go. Okay, NPR, that's a little bit better. Let's see. Go away. Stop asking me for money. Let's see. I asked her what happened. She said she saw a horrible video of babies in cages. Not only did he immediately know that she was referring to a deceptive footage, but the organization he runs, Fake Reporter, was the first to show the video portrayed something else entirely. The clip has been posted online for months. This is a video that we refuted. It's a lie. It's fake. West Bank combat soldier, war fact checker. Yeah, like it was complete bullshit. But, you know, this got ran in the fucking media and people pretended like it was true for however fucking long. And again, keep in mind, people don't usually read the updates. So they see a video of kids in cages, they hear it was Hamas, and they're done with it. Like that's it. And like this kind, and like the propaganda is so fucking strong with this one. Like, good God. Like, it's just, and for what, you know, and we'll talk about Biden a little bit later. I mean, I don't have that much to say on Biden, but I have one general fear. But anyway, let's.
Every civilized nation should stand with Israel in demanding that these hostages be freed immediately and freed unconditionally. I want to make clear
then why the fuck are you
regarding
bombing those positions?
Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11.
Well, the bombing of Pearl Harbor? You mean during the Second World War? A global military force powered by the other two global military forces at the time? And you're making that comparison to fucking Hamas, a terrorist cell of what? That's like consists of how many people? Maybe a couple thousand compared to the entire military force of the Japanese army in the 1940s. Fucking get the fuck out of here. Like, they're trying, like, the thing is, there's always this fucking equivalence that like tries to get drawn, that Israel's been trying to draw between like, oh, well, like, you know, there wasn't a ceasefire during like World War II. It's like, yeah, that was World War II, my guy. You're not in World War II, friend. I don't know if you realize this, but this is no different than us stomping on Iraq. That's all this is. That is what the relationship is. This isn't some like symmetrical relationship that Israel has with the people of Palestine or Hamas or any of this. This is just them again leveling a civilian a civilian city in the hopes that, you know, they get some members of Hamas. Be cool. It's just,
Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible says that there is a time for peace and a time for war. This is a time for war, a war for...
Like, Israel airstrike surge and God is destroying homes and killing dozens at a time. Like, escalated airstrikes across, and this was like what? This was the 24th. This was 6 days ago. Soaring death row from the bombardment, unprecedented. Like, it's just, yay.
For our common future. Today we draw a line between the forces of civilization and the forces of barbarism. It is a time for everyone to decide where they stand. Israel will stand against the forces of barbarism until victory. I hope and pray that civilized nations everywhere will back this fight. Because Israel's fight is your fight. Because if Hamas and Iran's axis of evil win, you will be their next target.
Jesus. You want to talk about some Trump level rhetoric. It's the you need to defend us because if you don't, then they're going to come for you next. Which, yeah, it probably will because we're supporting your like genocidal actions. And like, you know, I know people saw the video of like, what's it called? The hostages getting released and they were like, yeah, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, which it doesn't matter. You were like kidnapped. It's like you're kidnapped. There isn't really like a, you know, there wasn't like the, oh yeah. And like, they were like, oh, do you want to leave? Then you can just leave then. Who would like to be kidnapped? Like, that's not really a thing, but like, no, it's just, ugh.
That's why Israel's victory will be your victory.
Ugh,
but
disgusting.
Make no mistake, regardless of who stands with Israel will fight until this battle is won, and Israel will prevail. May God bless Israel, and may God bless all those who stand with Israel.
Ugh.
So the first question will go to...
Oh, lovely. Let's hear it.
News 18 India, Niraj. Please take the microphone, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Neeraj from India. I represent Network 18 Group in India.
Oh, no.
My question to you is that how do you see the India's stand on UN resolution? India abstained because in resolution there was no condemnation of terrorism.
I think that resolution was deeply flawed, and I was sorry to see that even many of our friends did not insist that there would be a full and powerful condemnation of the horrors that were committed here, that are horrors that no civilized country, including your country and so many others, would tolerate. So I hope that we don't see a repeat of these kinds of resolutions.
Yeah, wasn't the U.S. like the only one to fucking... Let's take a look. Humanitarian pauses, not enough. No, U.S. We must do everything possible to save lives. U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield said the lives of all humanitarian workers and all civilians, Israelis and Palestinian, must be protected. Dozens of rockets continue to fall on Israel. Again, like, hostages remain held captive in Gaza. People are suffering. Also, keep in mind, hostages and like that are being held by like Hamas are also there to be like, hey, maybe quit bombing, and that'd be, you know, like maybe don't bomb us because some of your people are here, and they just don't give a shit. International humanitarian law must be respected, and they don't give a shit. Like, international law has been very clear on the Israeli Palestine conflict. It has been very clear for quite a long time now, and it's just been ignored. Lives hang in the balance as we all must step up as the United States has done. Washington's contributions to humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people in Gaza, like. Oh, God, this shit boils my fucking blood. Hanging by a thread, Gaza and hospitals, of course. Of fucking course. Let's see. Urgent access to Gaza is required. Yeah, like, oh, God. Sierra Leone. Yeah, I want to see if I can find that resolution. Like, I'm curious. Let's see, resolution maybe? I type in, oh my God, I can't fucking spell. Secretary Council extends United Nations support mission Libya. Most recent. Speech, xenophobia, 6 committee speakers. Okay, control F. Israel. Here we go. General Assembly adopts resolution calling for the immediate sustained humanitarian truce leading to cessation of hostiles between Israel and Hamas. Oh, is this it? Possibly. Let's take a look. By record vote of 120 in favor and 14 against with 45 abstentions, the Assembly adopted the resolution titled Protection of the Civilians and Upholding Illegal Humanitarian Obligations. Jesus. Anyway, let's continue.
Go now to ABC America, Matt River.
Thank you, sir. It seems that the level of support that you have amongst the Israeli public has dropped considerably. So the question is, how can you continue to lead this country effectively during a very difficult time, and have you at all considered stepping down?
Has his polls taken a hit?
The only thing that I intend to have resign is Hamas. We're going to resign them to the dustbin of history. That's my goal. That's my responsibility. And that's what I'm leading the country to
authoritarian do. As far as I'm concerned.
This is my responsibility.
Wasn't this asshole facing like legal troubles also? And then there was like, you know, it's very convenient timing.
You know, and it's something that I think unites the entire country. We're all supporting the soldiers. We're supporting our commanders.
Or maybe
we're supporting the IDF. We're supporting, I think, the unbelievable efforts
of
our reservists and our security forces. We'll continue to do that until victory.
Stop it. Respondents show a marked preference for Gantz over Netanyahu, leading the country. 48% want the former defense minister, compared to 29% of the current prime minister.
I would like to
IDF,
ask you, there's a
57
widespread
approval rating.
discussion, especially among
Who the fuck is
relatives
Gantz?
of the hostages, about the course of military action you have taken so far. And the question if this is the only way to free the hostages. Of course, you are very successful in freeing one hostage on Sunday, but there's a widespread criticism that this doesn't allow place for other negotiations. What do you explain to the relatives of the hostages for this course, relying mostly on military pressure?
Okay, so this is apparently the guy that in that poll they mentioned. This is apparently a bit of, let's see, National Unity Party leader and War Minister Benny Gantz on Thursday gave the most detailed revelations on the record of one of Israel's decision makers to date regarding the war in Gaza. Gantz made it clear the government's original solitary goal of destroying Hamas and remaking the reality in Gaza has been adjusted by multiple other goals. If initial top sources, not only did Gantz join with the current government and defense officials and take responsibility for the failure to foresee Hamas's invasion, but more importantly, he defended the government's delay in the invasion. Of course, he did not. Anyway, however, in early days of the war, senior diplomat. Can I get like some speeches from Homeboy? Like, not how you slam for post blaming intelligence chiefs for October 7th. Apologize for blaming Israel. Yeah, I'm like kind of curious how like retract comments. Ooh, here we go. Let's see. Blaming forces for the attack. Opposition leader Gantz to form emergency unity government. Okay. Is he like any less extreme? Let's see. Right. I mean, I can't imagine. Let's see. I don't really know. I don't really know if they're gonna have like just his positions. Political career. 2018 announced formation of a new political party, but did not originally disclose his views. Israeli Resilience Party, first major political speech, yada yada yada. In addition, Gantz helped formulate unilateral separation plan from the institution. Munich, government formation attempts. Interesting. Let's see. Following AU Barak, 2011. Be recommended the government against appointed 27. Interesting. We'll have to look into this guy a little bit. If he's the opposition leader, that's like the big thing. If this is the alternative, we need to find out if he's we need to find out kind of what is Britannica? Yeah, we need to find out like where he stands on stuff. That's like the important part. Tragic hero, traitor, racist, and cold-blooded careerist, whatever. Anyway, we'll go back, but I'll keep this as I think of something interesting.
I met twice with the families of the hostages. You felt their anguish. I felt their anguish. I know this sense of, it's not only the sense of loss that bereaved parents have, it's a sense of not knowing, of continuous anguish. So I fully understand their concern. But our common assessment of all of the, not only the cabinet members, but also all the security forces and the military, is that the ground action actually creates the possibility, not the certainty, but the possibility of getting our hostages out. Because Hamas will not do it unless they're under pressure. They simply will not do it. They only do it under pressure. This creates pressure. And again, we obviously greeted one hostage with open arms after yesterday's successful action by Shabak and the IDF. But we're committed to getting all the hostages back home. We think that this method stands a chance. It's a goal that we're committed to.
Channel 7 Australia, Chris.
Mr. Prime Minister, Chris Reason from Channel 7 Australia. Mr. Prime Minister, Chris Reason from Channel 7 Australia. I want to ask a question from my country, and the people in my country are looking at this and wondering, they agree with you. They want you to chase down Hamas.
The Palestinian, okay, so I'm reading from AP News. The Palestinian death toll in the Israel-Hamas war has reached 8,306, according to the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. In the occupied West Bank, more than 110 Palestinians have been killed in violence in Israeli raids. Jesus. More than 1,400 people in Israel have been killed, most of them civilians, slain in the initial Hamas rampage that started the fighting October 7th. In addition, 240 hostages were taken from Israel into Gaza by the militant group. Jesus.
Us and terrorism and destroy terrorism in this region, etc. But
keep in mind, this is also the same argument our government used, where they're like, oh, we're the war on terror. Did that work out? Did that do anything but sacrifice a bunch of American military lives? No, it didn't. It didn't. Line the pockets of some folks, but, you know, didn't really do anything.
People can't understand why so many civilians have to die in this process. You argue that Hamas is putting them up as human shields.
Well, then
is that a good enough excuse? Are you inflicting here collective punishment on the people of Palestine?
That's kind
of... Not a single civilian has to die.
It's just a fucking joke. It's a fucking joke for him to say that.
Hamas merely has to let them go to the safe zone that we created in southeastern Gaza Strip. There's a safe zone there.
Well, yeah, and then what happens? Then you bomb the shit out of the area, killing them and probably more civilians, more Palestinian civilians. Like, it's just, at the end of the day, the hostages are there to, what's the word I'm looking for? To deter Israel from just indiscriminately bombing. But they're not. That's not happening.
Not a single civilian has to die. But Hamas is preventing them from leaving.
Oh, keep in mind, this is coming from the leader of the country that's been occupying another group of people for 75 years.
But I can tell you one thing: we're going out of our way to prevent civilian casualties.
That seems
not only by
laughable.
Asking civilians to move, calling them to move, arranging a place for them to be, which is safe. Also putting in humanitarian support. Providing them with,
if he was telling the truth, then that means they were doing a garbage job of it, which doesn't really speak any better to
means with food,
to the situation,
with water, with medicine, and so on. I think that this question should be placed on Hamas, and the more it's placed on Israel, the more you're going to see this repeated again and again and again. So other groups, other criminal states, other criminal organizations will use civilians as human shields. We cannot give immunity to these terrorists. We cannot give immunity to these savages.
Also, keep in mind, keep in mind that groups like Hamas, these kinds of terror cells, you're not going to stamp them out with these kinds of actions because they don't grow out of, they just don't grow out of anything other than reactionary politics. Like what Hamas is doing when it takes hostages, when they attack civilians, are lashing out because that's all they can do. That's all members of Hamas think they can do. You know, in their mind, for probably any member of Hamas, this is it. Like, they don't have any other options. Their land has been stolen from them. Their families have been bombed or shot. They don't see another way out of this. This is just flailing. This is just going out with some feeling of vengeance on their part. And again, that is due to the occupation by Israel. The minute Israel walks out of Gaza and let them establish a functional society not under their boot, the minute is when you will start to see the tide turn. But I personally think we might even be too late for that, to be perfectly honest. It might just be, no, we're too far gone for that. There isn't going back for the for Israel on this. There just might not be. They could do that. They could do the right thing. Stop bombing. Stop the collective punishment. Move out of Gaza and let people live again. And I don't know if the last 75 years people are just going to forget. So, I mean, I don't see an easy way out of this, or at the very least, I don't see a non-violent way out of this that I think is more likely, or like what is more possible. It's just Israel as a government has made it incredibly difficult for that society, for the Palestinian people, to not feel a sense of desperation, and that pushes people into the arms of Hamas. The same way violence committed by Hamas pushes people into the arms of the Israeli government. It's just this whole situation has been. This just should have been solved a long time ago, but we're here. We're where we are now. So,
which is, we have to do everything we can to minimize civilian casualties, but we cannot give up the fight because.
Yeah, like I know. I just started and I've repaused it again, but it's like death toll among Palestinians past 8,000, mostly women and minors. Like, what is it? 50%? What do I always hear people? What do I hear? Haas scream or whatever. 50% unemployment. Average age is like, what is it? Somewhere in the 20s or something. Like, this isn't a functional society, and it's not because they haven't attempted to build one. It's because they haven't been allowed to.
Then I think this will have disastrous consequences, not only for the future of my country, but for the future of your country, your countries. This is a battle of civilization against barbarians. The barbarians will do something that civilized countries will never do. And
Meanwhile, there's a fucking bomb over here fucking atomizing a bunch of people. And this guy wants to talk about other people being barbaric.
Civilized countries will make every effort to prevent this. And I'll give you one example. And I'll end with that because I have to go to manage this war and lead it. In 1944, the Royal Air Force bombed the Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen. It's a perfectly legitimate target. But the British pilots missed. And instead of the Gestapo headquarters, they hit a children's hospital nearby. And I think 84 children were hardly burned to death.
Yeah?
That is not a war crime. That is not something you blame Britain for doing.
What? What? Wait. We're not going to blame Britain for accidentally bombing a fucking children's hospital? No. What? You're insane, dude. You're fucking insane.
That was a legitimate act of war with tragic consequences that accompany such legitimate actions.
Okay. I want you to think about that. He just said bombing a children's hospital, even if it's an accident, perfectly fine. You should not blame the British Air Forces for that. Jesus Christ.
And you didn't tell the Allies, don't stamp out Nazism because of such tragic consequences.
We had to bomb the children's
hospital.
hospital.
They knew that the future of our civilization was at stake.
If we wanted to kill the Nazis.
Well, I'm telling you right now.
And that's exactly what this is.
The future of our
this Call of Duty video right here.
It's
just
we have to.
We're just going to bomb everything
we'll do it by
in the hopes
civilian
that
casualties.
Yeah, it hasn't. Yeah, done a shit job of it. Minimizing civilian casualties. What's really crazy is if you think about it, even if he's telling the truth, which he's not, by the way, but if he's telling the truth, they're minimize. This is what minimizing civilian casualties looks like to Benjamin Netanyahu. 8,000 dead, and this is what minimizing casualties looks like. You know the thing that they tell like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.